Đây mà ra đứng là nó thổi bay luôn á.
It began like any other humid November morning along Vietnam's central coast, fishermen setting out to see children, walking to school markets coming alive beneath the rising sun. But by nightfall, the sky itself had turned against them. From the depths of the South China Sea, Typhoon Kalmaegi, a swirling engine of heat and fury, was racing toward the coast. Within hours, its winds screamed past 155 miles per hour, tearing apart roofs, uprooting palm trees, and bending steel like paper. As lightning lit the horizon, rain poured sideways in blinding sheets, and the ocean rose to swallow entire streets. In Quang Ngai, cars floated down highways like driftwood. In the mountains of Dak Lak, rivers burst their banks, carrying away homes, bridges, and everything in their path. Power lines sparked against the black sky. The sound of the storm was deafening, a mix of roaring wind and breaking glass, like 1,000 freight trains colliding in the dark. By the time the eye passed overhead, it was clear this wasn't just another typhoon. It was a force of nature, rewritten by a changing planet. The kind of storm that reminds us how fragile even the strongest cities can be, when the sea and the sky decide to strike together. Typhoon Kalmaegi was born from the perfect storm, a patch of low pressure brewing over the South China Sea, where sea surface temperatures hovered around 86°, and upper-level winds remained eerily calm. These were the ideal conditions for rapid intensification, and within just 36 hours, a tropical disturbance transformed into a full-blown Category 4 equivalent super typhoon. By the evening of November 7, 2025, satellite imagery showed a perfectly formed eye, 25 miles wide, spinning with terrifying precision toward Vietnam's central coastline. As the typhoon closed in on Quang Ngai province, meteorologists at the Joint Typhoon Warning Center watched wind speeds climb past 155 miles per hour, with gusts approaching 100 km/h. Rain bands stretched hundreds of miles across, covering nearly the entire eastern seaboard of Vietnam. Emergency sirens blared through coastal towns as local officials ordered mass evacuations. Fishermen were recalled from sea, and families sought shelter in schools and churches, their windows boarded with plywood and prayer. But as night fell, the storm's roar grew louder than any warning could prepare them for. The pressure dropped below 930 millibars, signaling a monster ready to strike. When Kalmaegi made landfall near Quang Ngai City just after 10 p.m., the wind hit like a wall. Power lines snapped. Transformer explosions lit the sky in flashes of blue and orange. Within minutes, entire blocks were plunged into darkness. The typhoon had arrived, and it wasn't slowing down. When Typhoon Kalmaegi struck land, the calm before the storm vanished in seconds. The first wall of wind hit Quang Ngai City like a freight train, tearing off rooftops, hurling billboards down the streets, and bending streetlights until they snapped. Within minutes, entire neighborhoods went dark, the power grid collapsing under the storm's weight. The howling wind was constant, no pauses, no mercy, and the air filled with the metallic sound of corrugated iron flying through the night. As the storm's core moved inland, torrential rain followed. In just 12 hours, more than 16 inches of rainfall drowned the valleys and river basins of Dak Lak. The Dak Bla and Krong Ana rivers burst their banks, submerging villages, that had never seen water rise this fast. Roads disappeared under swirling brown currents, and cars floated like toy boats through the floodwater. Witnesses described the moment when the mountain seemed to bleed with landslides, tumbling down in roaring avalanches of mud and stone. Families fled with only what they could carry: flashlights, children, and hope. Many found refuge on rooftops or climbed trees as the floodwaters crept higher each hour. In some towns, emergency sirens drowned beneath the storm's roar. Across the Central Highlands, rescue teams waded chest-deep through the darkness, shouting through megaphones and knocking on doors, hoping to find survivors before the water did. By midnight, Typhoon Kalmaegi had swallowed half the region, and the line between land and sea no longer existed.
Trời ơi, mọi người ơi.
By dawn on November 8th, the heart of Vietnam's central coast lay paralyzed. Quang Ngai, once a bustling city of 500,000 people, was now a maze of downed power lines, uprooted trees, and waterlogged streets. Transformers sparked in the distance, sending flashes of blue light across the skyline as crews worked desperately to cut power before fires spread. The smell of salt fuel and wet concrete hung in the air, the unmistakable scent of a city hit by something beyond comprehension. Hospitals ran on backup generators and emergency rooms filled with the injured people struck by flying debris or trapped under collapsed roofs. Over 600,000 residents lost electricity, and cell towers were knocked offline, leaving entire districts cut off from the outside world. For many, the only light came from candles or the glow of phone screens as families gathered in silence, listening to the rain hammer their walls. Further inland, Dak Lak faced a different battle. Mountain roads were buried under landslides, cutting off dozens of communities. Villagers used ropes to cross raging rivers, while soldiers delivered food and medicine by boat and helicopter. At Buon Ma Thuat, winds exceeding 120 mph ripped through farmlands, destroying coffee plantations, the region's economic lifeline. Crops that took years to grow were flattened in a single night. By afternoon, the storm began to weaken, but its devastation had already carved itself into Vietnam's landscape. Bridges were gone, rivers were rising, and the nation's heartland was drowning in silence.
Rồi xong luôn nha anh chị em ơi, quýnh cái mưa luôn rồi, hết bán luôn rồi.
By the time Typhoon Kalmaegi began to weaken, Vietnam's heartland had already endured one of the worst nights in its modern history. The morning light revealed what the darkness had hidden: entire villages, erased power lines, tangled like vines, and streets that had become rivers. In Quang Ngai, more than 80% of homes in coastal wards sustained heavy damage. Concrete walls crumbled under the force of winds that had reached 155 km/h, and metal rooftops lay twisted in fields miles away from where they once stood. Hospitals overflowed with the injured, many suffering from debris strikes or collapsing structures. Emergency shelters, schools, churches, and community centers were packed beyond capacity, housing over 150,000 evacuees across the central provinces. Food and clean water grew scarce as flooding cut off major highways, leaving rescue convoys stranded for hours. In Dak Lak, the agricultural toll was catastrophic. Tens of thousands of acres of coffee and rice fields, the lifeblood of the local economy, were submerged or destroyed. Livestock drowned by the thousands, and power outages crippled irrigation systems across the highlands. Economists warned that the financial losses could exceed $2 billion. But for most families, the damage was far more personal. Homes gone, memories lost, futures uncertain. As relief teams arrived, they faced daunting challenges: roads buried under landslides, bridges washed away, and communication networks still down. Yet amid the chaos, something extraordinary emerged: the resilience of the Vietnamese people. Volunteers worked side by side with soldiers, clearing debris and delivering supplies through waist-deep water. In every shattered neighborhood, the sound of hammers, prayers, and human determination began to rise once more.
Chú anh chị ơi, đây là khung cảnh 18 giờ tại cái đoạn đường.
When the skies finally cleared on November 9th, the scale of Typhoon Kalmaegi's destruction stretched from the coast of Quang Ngai to the highlands of Dak Lak, a 200-mile corridor of devastation. Satellite images revealed entire stretches of farmland, drowned beneath brown water bridges, torn in half, and neighborhoods reduced to patches of gray debris. The once green heart of central Vietnam now looked scarred and hollow, its rivers swollen beyond recognition. Officials confirmed that hundreds of thousands remained displaced, with relief operations continuing around the clock. Convoys of military trucks rumbled through flooded highways, delivering food, water, and medical supplies, while helicopters airlifted stranded families from rooftops and mountain villages. The Vietnamese Red Cross reported more than 5,000 homes destroyed and over 700,000 residents without power for a second consecutive day. International assistance began pouring in aid from the United States, Japan, and Australia joined local rescue forces, helping reopen roads and set up temporary shelters. But beyond the immediate disaster, experts warned that Kalmaegi's rapid intensification was another chapter in a much larger story. The typhoon had strengthened from a tropical storm to a near Category 5 equivalent in just 36 hours, a sign of warmer oceans feeding storms with unprecedented energy. Meteorologists called it a climate wake-up call for Southeast Asia, where rising sea temperatures are rewriting the region's storm patterns. For Vietnam, the storm left not just destruction, but a message that preparation must evolve as the planet changes. As survivors swept mud from their homes and rebuilt shattered lives, one truth echoed across the floodplains. This was not just a storm of the season, but a warning of the world to come. As calm slowly returned to Quang Ngai and Dak Lak, the sound of hammering replaced the roar of the storm. Families began patching roofs with salvaged metal farmers, drained flooded fields, and children searched for toys in the mud. Life was beginning again, fragile, determined, and defiant. But Typhoon Kalmaegi left behind more than wreckage. It left a question that every coastline must now face. How many more times can we rebuild before the storms outpace us? How long before once-in-a-century disasters become yearly headlines? For the people of Vietnam, this was not just another typhoon. It was a glimpse of what a warming planet can unleash. And though their courage stands unbroken, the message carried by the wind is one that belongs to all of us. From the Gulf Coast to the Pacific Islands, from Florida to Hanoi, the atmosphere is changing faster than we are. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of nature and the resilience of the human spirit, don't let it fade here. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to understand what's really happening. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth behind our changing world. Because every storm tells a story, and every story is a warning. The question is, are we listening?